They called us primitive. Not because we lacked technology, but because we lost connection. Imagine a civilization watching us, seeing our skyscrapers pierce the clouds, our rockets escape gravity, and yet whispering they are still bound to fear, still enslaved by illusion. They called us primitive because we forgot who we are. We learned to conquer space, but not our minds. We discovered new worlds, but abandoned the one within. Humanity has become a species that confuses progress with peace, data with wisdom, and noise with truth. Tonight I want to take you on a journey, not beyond the stars, but beyond the veil of ignorance. Because maybe, just maybe, the real evolution is not in what we build, but in what we become. They called us primitive, but not because of our lack of machines or science. No, that's the illusion we've wrapped ourselves in. The belief that the more complex our inventions become, the more advanced we are. Imagine an intelligence thousands of years ahead of us, looking down and seeing our species, endlessly building, endlessly consuming, endlessly running, yet never stopping to be. They wouldn't see progress, they'd see confusion. They wouldn't see a civilization in its golden age, they'd see a race lost in its own reflection, mistaking the mirror for the soul. To them, we are primitive not because we lack technology, but because we lack awareness. We've built skyscrapers that touch the heavens, but our hearts remain anchored to the ground. We've reached the moon, yet we haven't reached the peace within our own minds. We dissect atoms, but we can't hold a conversation without defending our egos. We have access to infinite knowledge, yet we barely understand love. They would see a people obsessed with doing, but terrified of being. They would see humans measuring their worth in likes and followers, in money and fame, rather than in the depth of their compassion or the purity of their presence. We became so addicted to movement that silence feels uncomfortable, so addicted to progress that stillness feels like failure. That's why they called us primitive, because even though we've built artificial suns and virtual worlds, we have yet to master the one universe that matters most, our inner one. To an evolved mind, advancement is not about invention. It's about integration. It's about how deeply we live, how consciously we connect, how softly we exist in harmony with what is. Aliens, if they exist beyond the veil, would see that we are still children playing with fire, intelligent enough to build weapons, but too immature to live without them. They'd see a species that has decoded DNA but forgotten the code of the heart. They'd see a civilization that can map galaxies, yet still divides itself over skin, language, and belief. Primitive to them doesn't mean uncivilized. It means unawakened. It means to still live as if we are separate from the universe, separate from nature, separate from each other. It means to build walls while calling it security, to destroy forest while calling it development, to dominate rather than cooperate, and to conquer rather than understand. They would see our potential, yes, but they would also see our blindness. And perhaps they would whisper to one another, not in judgment, but in sorrow, they have forgotten what they are. They are gods pretending to be small, because in truth, the greatest tragedy of humanity isn't that we are behind technologically. It's that we are asleep spiritually. We're like a species with wings, standing on a mountain, arguing about who owns the sky while forgetting that we were born to fly. Primitive is not about tools, it's about consciousness. And the moment we remember that, the moment we turn our gaze inward and reclaim our forgotten divinity, that's when we stop being primitive. Not in their eyes, but in our own. Technology without consciousness is not evolution, it is regression wrapped in glitter. We built machines to make life easier, yet our hearts have become heavier. We invented devices to connect the world, yet we've never been more alone. Look around. People's eyes glow with the blue light of their screens, but not with the fire of their souls. We scroll endlessly, chasing fragments of validation, while the essence of true connection withers. Our brilliance has outgrown our wisdom. We have mastered the art of invention, but lost the meaning of intention. We are a civilization that can create artificial intelligence, but not authentic empathy. We can design algorithms that predict behavior, yet we cannot predict the moment our hearts will break. We can build robots that simulate emotion, but we struggle to sit with our own pain. We've built faster systems, faster communication, faster everything. But we've forgotten that evolution is not speed, it is depth. The alien mind would see our technological landscape, our satellites, our digital realms, our machines, and whisper, "They have created gods of metal, yet they still worship fear." But technology, when divorced from consciousness, becomes a mirror that magnifies our emptiness. The smarter our tools become, the less we use our own inner intelligence. We outsource our thinking to machines, our feeling to entertainment, our purpose to systems that feed on distraction. We created tools to serve us, but somewhere along the way we began serving them. Our minds became extensions of our devices, not the other way around. We traded intuition for information, wisdom for data, and now we drown in knowledge but starve for meaning. This is why they would call us primitive, because we mistake technological advancement for spiritual maturity. We think that creating something new is the same as becoming something more. But creation without awareness is just noise. It multiplies confusion instead of consciousness. Every time we invent something that disconnects us from ourselves, we regress. Every time we use technology to escape emotion instead of evolve through it, we move backward, not forward. The aliens would see that we use science to manipulate nature rather than understand it. We extract, exploit, and consume, convinced that control equals mastery. Yet real mastery is not domination, it's harmony. The universe doesn't conquer, it collaborates. Energy doesn't compete, it flows. But humanity, obsessed with control, uses technology as a weapon against the very fabric of life. We've learned to split atoms, but not to unite hearts. We've sent probes across galaxies, yet we cannot send peace across our own streets. Technology could have been our bridge to higher consciousness, a tool to expand awareness, heal suffering, and bring the global mind into alignment. But instead, we used it to amplify ego, to commercialize attention, to replace presence with distraction. We built virtual realities because reality itself became too uncomfortable. We created filters to hide our imperfections instead of healing them. And now, even with the entire world at our fingertips, we struggle to feel whole. If aliens observe us, they wouldn't marvel at our intelligence. They would mourn our imbalance, because they would see a race capable of building machines that think, but incapable of living from the heart. They would see that our greatest invention, the human mind, became our greatest prison when separated from the soul. Technology is not evil, it is neutral. But when wielded by beings who are spiritually asleep, it becomes a reflection of their unconsciousness. And that is the true danger. Not the machines themselves, but the hands and hearts that guide them. True advancement will come only when technology becomes an extension of consciousness, when every innovation serves the awakening of the spirit rather than the stimulation of the senses. Until then, we are like children playing with lightning, unaware of its power, unaware of its consequence. The universe will not measure our evolution by how high our rockets fly, but by how deeply our hearts open. And until we merge intelligence with compassion, until we fuse science with soul, we will remain exactly as they said, primitive creators of brilliant chaos. We live like travelers who forgot the address of their own home. We rush from one task to the next, carry conversations as if crossing a busy street, and collect moments like receipts, all of them shallow, none of them kept. Inside there's a silence that aches, an emptiness that the world tries to fill with noise. We plaster our days with schedules and our nights with screens, believing that business is the antidote to loneliness, when in truth business is the lock that keeps us from stepping inside. The more we avoid ourselves, the more alienated we become from the one person we can never truly escape, ourselves. This disconnection is not dramatic, it is domestic. It hides in the things we say to ourselves in the mirror, the small betrayals of intuition we call pragmatic choices, the way we swallow inconvenient feelings because they complicate our carefully constructed lives. We learn to be polite to strangers and ruthless with our own hearts. We learn to keep up appearances and to silence the tiny voice that asks for truth. Over time, the silence becomes louder than the voice ever was, and the absence of listening becomes our steady soundtrack. We forget how to be present with pain, and so pain becomes a ghost we tiptoe around, never invited to dinner, never explained, never released. When you lose touch with yourself, you begin to outsource your reality. You let advertisements decide what will make you happy, algorithms decide what you should think, and crowds decide who you are. Identity becomes a college of borrowed slogans and trend-driven gestures. You wear other people's certainties like ill-fitting clothes and wonder why they itch. The self, which once pulsed with curiosity, becomes a hollow role performed for likes and approvals. The inner compass that once guided choices is dulled by the constant clamor of external voices. Without that compass, every decision tilts towards safety or shame, never toward the freedom of authenticity. Disconnection is contagious. It spreads through families, through systems, through cultures that prize productivity over presence. A parent who never learned the language of their own feelings is less able to teach a child how to listen to theirs. Schools reward memorization, but rarely nurture introspection. Workplaces celebrate output while ignoring meaning, so entire communities become expert practitioners of not feeling. We have become architects of emotional illiteracy, building towers of competence on foundations of numbness. And then we wonder why relationships crumble, why empathy is scarce, why loneliness sits like a permanent guest at every table. Yet the remedy is not complicated. It is not another self-help trick or a new app. The remedy is an invitation to come home. It begins with small, radical acts: to sit with a feeling without fixing it, to ask a quiet question and wait for the answer, to listen to the body's wisdom rather than the mind's urgency. It asks for the courage to say no to agendas that erase you, and yes to moments that remember you. To become intimate with yourself requires tenderness, not the brittle kindness of surface-level affirmation, but the soft, fierce attention that sees what is true and stays. As we reclaim connection to self, other connections change. When you know your own sorrow, you can hold another's without drowning. When you understand your fear, you stop projecting it as threat onto strangers. Presence is contagious in the healing direction. One person who knows their inner weather becomes a shelter for another. The ripple is simple and relentless. A single act of turning inward, even for 5 quiet breaths, begins to rewire a life built on autopilot. You begin to choose differently because the choices now come from an embodied place of wisdom, not from the habit of avoidance. This is not about becoming perfect. It is about becoming real. Realness is the currency that buys belonging. The moment you allow your contradictions into the room, the tension that isolated you begins to soften. You will still feel shame, anger, confusion. You will still be tempted to scroll away when the feelings get uncomfortable. But each time you stay, each time you greet the inner guest rather than slam the door, you expand the terrain of your being. You make room for the next truth to live inside you. We imagine aliens calling us primitive because we built great machines. But their quiet sorrow, if they could see, would be for the species that forgot how to listen to itself. True civilization would be measured by our capacity to feel, to hold, and to respond with tenderness. Until we start treating our own inner lives as the priority they are, technological marvels will remain hollow trophies. Reconnecting with self is not a luxury, it is the revolution. It is the small, stubborn practice that quietly undoes generations of forgetting and teaches us how to live like the evolved beings we were always meant to be. You said, "Fear is the oldest shadow that walks beside humanity. It has been our companion since the dawn of consciousness, whispering in our ears when the night was too quiet, when the unknown loomed too large, when the mind needed something to blame for its trembling. It began as a guardian, a warning signal meant to protect us. But somewhere along the line, fear became more than a voice of caution. It became the architect of our limitations. It crept into our decisions, our relationships, our governments, our religions. It shaped the boundaries of what we dared to imagine. And now it governs a world that claims to be free but is enslaved by invisible chains. If aliens looked upon us, they would not see a planet ruled by love or wisdom. They would see a planet ruled by fear disguised as order. They would see fear wearing the mask of ambition, of nationalism, of security. They would see how fear builds walls between countries and hearts, how it fuels wars, how it silences truth, tellers and punishes dreamers. They would see a species afraid to lose control and, because of that, afraid to truly live. We have built entire civilizations around managing fear instead of transcending it. We create weapons because we fear weakness. We hoard because we fear lack. We conform because we fear rejection. We worship power because we fear our own vulnerability. Fear has become the quiet religion of humanity, a faith that demands constant sacrifice. Every time we silence our intuition to fit in, fear collects its offering. Every time we betray our authenticity to please others, fear bows its head in satisfaction. It doesn't need temples or altars because it lives within our habits, in the way we shrink from our truth. It hides behind politeness, behind the careful words we speak to avoid conflict. It disguises itself as reason, as logic, as being realistic. And so we rarely recognize it for what it truly is, a thief that steals potential moment by moment. Look around at the modern world. Fear has evolved with us. It no longer hides in the dark forest, it hides in the bright screen. It tells us we are not enough unless we look a certain way, own certain things, achieve certain goals. It keeps us comparing, doubting, chasing. It makes us terrified of being left behind. It has turned the human spirit into a marketplace where our insecurities are bought and sold daily. We mistake this anxiety for ambition, this restlessness for purpose. We are told to hustle, to grind, to never stop, because if we stop, the silence might reveal how frightened we truly are. Fear is the reason we fight one another, because it convinces us that separation keeps us safe. It whispers that the unknown is dangerous. That difference is a threat. That vulnerability is weakness. But fear forgets that love was never meant to protect us. It was meant to connect us. And connection always demands risk. The risk of being seen, of being hurt, of being changed. The aliens would see that humanity's wars, both personal and global, are not conflicts of ideology, but of insecurity. We are not fighting for truth. We are fighting for safety in illusions that never existed. The tragedy of fear is that it shrinks infinite beings into survivalists. We have the ability to create beauty, to expand consciousness, to explore the universe within and beyond. But fear convinces us to settle for comfort instead. It tells us that the small life is safer, that the predictable path is wiser, that it's better to remain unfulfilled than to risk the unknown. And so countless dreams die quietly, not from failure but from hesitation. Humanity's true enemy has never been death. It has always been fear of truly living. To overcome fear, we must first stop fighting it, because resistance feeds it. The moment we see fear for what it is, a shadow cast by the mind's misunderstanding, it begins to dissolve. Fear is not evil. It's just a signal that our perception is too narrow. It thrives in the absence of awareness. The more light of consciousness we bring, the weaker it becomes. When you face fear, you begin to remember that you are not the frightened voice. You are the one who hears it. You are not the trembling body. You are the awareness that observes it. This realization breaks the spell. Imagine what would happen if humanity began to live beyond fear. Imagine decisions made not from insecurity but from inspiration. Imagine leaders who choose empathy over ego, societies that protect life instead of possessions, people who speak truth even when their voices shake. That is what it means to transcend fear, to act in love despite uncertainty, to see risk not as danger, but as the invitation to grow. That is evolution. That is courage, not the absence of fear, but mastery over it. The aliens might look at us and say, they are still primitive, for they have not yet conquered fear. But perhaps what they do not know is that the story is still unfolding. That deep beneath the noise of panic and division, something ancient is stirring. A remembrance that love is older than fear and stronger. The day we stop worshipping fear and start listening to love will be the day humanity takes its first real step into the cosmos. Not with rockets, but with awareness. And then, finally, they will see us not as primitive beings trapped by emotion, but as awakened souls learning how to rise. Awareness is the quiet revolution that changes everything. It is invisible, gentle, and yet it carries the power to collapse entire empires of illusion. When awareness rises, it doesn't shout, it observes. It doesn't demand, it reveals. Awareness is the light that exposes the architecture of our suffering, not to shame us, but to free us. The moment we begin to see, truly see, the machinery of our own mind, the endless loops of thought and reaction that keep us chained, That is the moment evolution begins. Awareness is not an act of doing, it is an act of remembering. It is waking from the trance of automatic living and realizing that you are not the dream, you are the dreamer. The tragedy of the human condition is that we have built civilizations without building consciousness. We study the stars but not the spaces between our own thoughts. We learn how to measure time but not how to live in it. We explore the depths of the ocean while our own emotional depths remain unexplored, dark and neglected. We treat awareness as something abstract, something spiritual, something reserved for meditation or mystics, but it is the most practical force in existence. Awareness is the root of every transformation, the soil in which healing and truth grow. Without it, even our kindness becomes mechanical, our compassion conditional, our love unconscious. When you become aware, war within you begins to end. You begin to notice how often you fight yourself, how you argue with your feelings, how you resist the present moment, how you react instead of respond. The simple act of noticing without judgment begins to dissolve the very things that enslave you. Awareness is the solvent of the soul's knots. It softens what the mind has hardened. It teaches you that you don't need to fix everything. You only need to see it clearly. Clarity itself is healing. When you shine light on confusion, confusion cannot survive. If aliens watched our species, they would not be amazed by our intelligence. They would be astonished by our blindness. They would see how beings capable of divine consciousness walk through life half asleep, ruled by unexamined thoughts, reacting to ghosts from their past, fighting shadows of their own making. They would see how we destroy each other, because we cannot yet see ourselves. A species without awareness is like a body without sight, moving, functioning, but constantly colliding with its own creations. Every war, every conflict, every injustice is a symptom of collective unawareness. We keep trying to solve problems externally, but the root is internal. Awareness is not just personal healing, it is global medicine. Awareness begins quietly. It begins in a single breath, a single pause, a single moment of presence. It is the decision to look inward before reacting outward, to listen before defending, to question before believing. It teaches us to stop blaming and start understanding. The moment you become aware of your anger, it loses its control. The moment you notice your fear without running from it, you begin to transcend it. The act of observing shifts the energy, because the observer is the seat of freedom. When you watch the storm instead of becoming the storm, you realize that awareness was the calm sky all along. Our world is desperate for awareness because we have become masters of distraction. We fill our days with noise so that we don't have to face ourselves. We run toward the next thing, the next goal, the next pleasure, not realizing that the one thing we are searching for is the silence we keep avoiding. Awareness is the opposite of escape. It is the homecoming. It is where we sit in the stillness and remember that everything we've been chasing was already here, quietly waiting behind the noise. With awareness, compassion awakens. You begin to see that every person who hurts others is only acting out their own unconscious pain. You stop taking everything personally. You stop judging others for being asleep because you remember when you two were dreaming. You start to forgive, not as a moral act, but as a natural consequence of seeing clearly. The heart, once burdened by resentment, begins to breathe again. Awareness softens cruelty into understanding and replaces fear with presence. Awareness is not found in some distant realm. It is born in the smallest moments. In the way you notice sunlight on your skin, in the way you feel your heart beat before speaking words of anger, in the way you sense another person's pain without needing to fix it. It is a way of being awake in the ordinary, of making every moment sacred simply by seeing it. And when awareness becomes collective, when enough people choose to live awake, the world itself begins to shift. Systems built on unconsciousness start to crumble because awareness no longer feeds them. Violence loses its audience. Lies lose their power. The noise of the old world begins to fade. This is the silent revolution the universe has been waiting for. Not a rebellion of fists, but of seeing. Not a fight, but a remembrance. Awareness is the next stage of human evolution, not an evolution of body or technology, but of perception. When humanity finally realizes that seeing is more powerful than striving, that being awake is greater than being rich or strong, the entire rhythm of existence will change. We will stop trying to conquer the universe and start listening to it. We will stop trying to dominate nature and start harmonizing with it. Awareness will reveal that the universe was never outside of us, that the galaxies we admire are mirrors of the consciousness within. And maybe then, when the stars themselves recognize their reflection in human eyes, those watching from distant worlds will say, they have awakened. They remember now. Because awareness is not something we gain, it is something we uncover. It has been with us all along, waiting for us to stop running long enough to see. The moment we turn inward, the illusion of separation fades, and we realize we were never primitive, only asleep. And in that awakening, humanity will finally take its first real breath as a conscious species, not by reaching for the stars, but by seeing the light that has always burned quietly within. There is a vast intelligence woven through everything, a presence that breathes through the trees, that hums in the rhythm of the oceans, that moves silently between the stars. It does not speak in words, it speaks in vibration, in symbols, in intuition. It speaks in the way a sudden thought arrives in your mind without origin, in the way a stranger's kindness seems perfectly timed, in the way life rearranges itself around your awareness when you begin to listen. This intelligence is not distant. It is not the property of gods or aliens or sages. It is the current that connects all things, the unseen architecture of existence itself. We have called it by many names. God's source, the universe, the field. But names are too small for what it truly is. It is the consciousness behind consciousness. Humanity once knew how to listen to it. There was a time when our ancestors moved in rhythm with the seasons, spoke with rivers, honored the sky, and understood that the same life that grew the forest was the life that pulsed in their veins. Awareness of this truth guided them, not through logic but through alignment. Then came the age of reason, and reason, though powerful, made us deaf to the music of the cosmos. We began to trust only what could be measured, seen, proven, dissected. We reduced the infinite to the empirical, the mysterious to the manageable, and in doing so, we built a civilization brilliant in knowledge but poor in wisdom. The more we disconnected from universal intelligence, the more lost we became. We began to mistake isolation for individuality, domination for mastery. We no longer saw nature as part of us, but as a resource to exploit. We forgot that the same consciousness that animates us animates every atom of creation. The forests began to die because we stopped hearing them breathe. The oceans began to rise because we stopped feeling their pulse. And inside us, an emptiness began to grow, the echo of a forgotten connection. That emptiness became our hunger, our consumerism, our endless search for meaning in things that could never provide it. Yet the universal intelligence never left. It has been waiting, patient as the stars, whispering through synchronicity, through dreams, through the quiet intuition that we dismiss as coincidence. Every time you have felt a nudge that said, "Go there, call them. Don't give up," that was it. Every time life has fallen apart only to reveal a higher order you couldn't see at first, that was it. Every time something inside you said this is right even when the world said otherwise, that was it. This intelligence is not something we need to find, it's something we need to remember. But remembering requires humility. It requires us to accept that we are not the architects of existence. We are participants in it. The ego resists this truth because it wants to control, to own, to define. Yet control is the opposite of connection. The more we surrender the need to dominate life, the more life begins to reveal its intelligence through us. The poet begins to write words they didn't know they had. The scientist receives insights that logic alone cannot explain. The healer feels guided hands that move with precision beyond training. The mother senses danger miles away and moves before thought. These are not miracles, they are reminders. They are glimpses of what happens when a human being remembers they are a conduit, not a creator separate from creation. The universe is always communicating, but it does not compete for our attention. It waits for our stillness. When you slow down, when you breathe, when you silence the endless chatter of the mind, you begin to notice patterns. The same numbers appear, the same symbols repeat. People arrive just when you need them. The right book falls off the shelf. The moment you align with awareness, life itself becomes your teacher. Every obstacle becomes a message. Every delay becomes divine timing. Every heartbreak becomes initiation. The intelligence guiding it all is not random. It is orchestration at a scale so vast our logic cannot comprehend it, but our soul recognizes it immediately. If those from beyond our planet were watching, they would see that humanity's evolution depends not on technology, but on reconnection to this intelligence. They would see how far we've wandered from the pulse of the universe, building machines that imitate connection while our spirits remain unplugged from the source of all life. They would see that true progress is not interplanetary exploration, but interplanetary awakening. Because the stars we look up to are not foreign, they are our own reflection. The same energy that births them burns quietly in our hearts. We are stardust with memory loss. To reconnect with universal intelligence is to reawaken that memory. It is to feel, not just believe, that you are both the wave and the ocean. It is to live with reverence, to recognize that every person you meet is a fragment of the same consciousness wearing a different face. It is to realize that the divine is not above you but within you, guiding, breathing, creating through you. This understanding changes everything. It ends competition because you can no longer compete with yourself. It dissolves fear because you see that nothing can truly be lost in a universe that is eternally whole. It replaces anxiety with trust, not a blind faith, but a deep knowing that life unfolds exactly as it should at the pace it must. The reconnection begins in silence. It begins when we stop asking the universe to serve our desires and start listening to what the universe desires through us. It begins when prayer stops being a request and becomes a conversation. It begins when meditation stops being a technique and becomes communion. And once we learn to listen, the entire rhythm of our lives shifts. We no longer chase signs, we live as them. We no longer seek purpose, we embody it. Our actions become guided, our words precise, our presence healing. The universal intelligence is the pulse of creation itself, and it has never stopped beating. When humanity remembers how to feel that pulse again, when we awaken not only the mind but the spirit, when we realize that consciousness is not something we own but something we are, then the distance between us and the stars will disappear, because the stars are not watching us from afar. They are within us, burning with the same light that birthed the cosmos. And when we remember that, the universe will no longer whisper. It will sing through us, and we will finally remember the song. The moment humanity awakens to its forgotten connection with the cosmos, something profound begins to unfold, a transformation not of technology or power, but of consciousness itself. This awakening is not loud or dramatic, it is subtle. Like dawn spreading across the horizon, one ray of light at a time. It starts in the individual heart, in the quiet recognition that I am more than this body, more than this story, more than this brief life. When enough people remember that, a collective shift begins, one that no government, no system, no ideology can contain. Because true evolution is not external progress, it is internal remembrance. It is not about reaching new planets, but about rediscovering the vastness within. For too long, we have equated advancement with control. We have believed that to evolve is to conquer, to bend nature, time, even life itself to our will. But real evolution does not move through domination, it moves through harmony. The universe does not expand by force. It expands through flow. And when human beings align with that same flow, when our thoughts, emotions, and actions vibrate in coherence with the rhythm of the cosmos, we stop existing in fragments. We become whole again. That is when true intelligence awakens, not the intelligence of intellect or data, but the intelligence of awareness. It is not a skill you learn. It is a remembering of what has always been alive inside you. When this awakening happens, perception changes entirely. You begin to see energy where others see form. You sense connection where others sense separation. You recognize that every event, no matter how painful, is not punishment. It is precision. Life stops being random and starts being relational. You understand that every person who crosses your path is a mirror, reflecting some aspect of yourself, either the love you've forgotten or the fear you still hold. You begin to see that conflict is simply consciousness trying to reconcile itself, And instead of reacting, you start responding from a place of deep seeing. That's when your words begin to carry power, not because they are clever, but because they are true. Human awakening is not a destination, it's a remembering of origin. It's a movement from survival to awareness, from separation to unity, from illusion to essence. When you awaken, you realize that everything you've been searching for outside you, peace, love, purpose, connection, was waiting quietly within you all along. The noise of the world just made it hard to hear. Awakening strips away that noise layer by layer. It dismantles false identities, beliefs and fears. It breaks you open, not to destroy you, but to reveal you. Because awakening isn't about becoming someone new, it's about unbecoming everything that isn't truly you. But awakening also hurts, because light exposes what darkness has hidden. It brings clarity to the illusions we've built entire lives around. You may feel alone in the process, misunderstood, even judged by those still asleep. But solitude in awakening is sacred. It's the cocoon stage between who you were and who you are becoming. And just like a butterfly can't return to being a caterpillar, once you awaken, you cannot go back. You start to crave truth over comfort, awareness over approval, alignment over acceptance. You begin to live guided by inner resonance rather than external validation. And even though that may isolate you at first, it also liberates you completely. As individuals awaken, the collective begins to shift. The systems built on fear and control start to crumble because awakened people no longer feed them. The need to dominate fades when you see yourself in all things. The urge to exploit dissolves when you feel the living pulse in everything around you. The awakened human no longer seeks to escape the earth. They learn to love it, heal it, protect it, because they understand it is not a rock floating in space. It is a living organism of consciousness, and we are its cells. This is not poetic, it is literal. The same electromagnetic field that surrounds your heart mirrors the field of the earth. You are not living on the planet, you are living with it. The awakening of humanity also means the awakening of compassion, because when you see clearly, judgment loses its power. You stop labeling people as good or bad, right or wrong. You see them as souls at different stages of remembering. You begin to recognize that every act of cruelty is not evil at its core but ignorance, the blindness of disconnection, and instead of feeding that blindness with more hate, you offer presence. You become the stillness that allows others to remember. This doesn't mean you tolerate harm, it means you move with wisdom instead of reaction. You fight darkness not by matching its energy, but by illuminating it. When awakening spreads through the collective, the fabric of human life begins to reweave itself. Our priorities change. Competition gives way to collaboration, profit yields to purpose. Hierarchies dissolve because awareness recognizes no higher or lower, only different expressions of the same consciousness. Technology becomes a tool of harmony, not distraction. Education begins to cultivate awareness instead of conformity. Religion evolves from dogma to direct experience. Science reunites with spirit, and the two no longer contradict but complete each other. One explaining the mechanism, the other revealing the meaning. Humanity begins to live as a single organism, aware of its interdependence with everything in existence. This awakening is not some distant prophecy. It is happening now in the quiet revolutions of individual hearts. It is happening in the conversations that challenge illusion, in the silence of meditation, in the tears that come when truth finally pierces through denial. It's happening every time you choose awareness over numbness, love over fear, authenticity over approval. It is happening when you decide to heal your pain instead of project it. Every act of awareness contributes to the collective remembering, because consciousness is contagious. When one person wakes up, it sends ripples through the whole field. That is why your awakening matters. It's not personal, it's planetary. When this collective remembering reaches critical mass, humanity will no longer look outward to find alien life for validation. We will no longer need beings from the stars to tell us who we are. We will have remembered that we, too, are cosmic beings, temporarily human, eternally infinite. The Leons will not see us as primitive anymore, because they will recognize that we've become what we were always meant to be. conscious creators aligned with the intelligence of the universe itself. We will have moved from separation to symphony, from fear to awareness, from survival to creation. That is the awakening, the return to remembrance, the realization that the divine didn't abandon humanity, humanity abandoned awareness. And now awareness is returning, spreading like wildfire through the collective mind. And as it does, the very frequency of Earth will rise. You will feel it in the air, in the way people speak, in the silence between words. The old world will dissolve, not through destruction, but through evolution. Because when light enters the darkness, darkness doesn't fight, it transforms. Humanity's awakening will not be the end of the world. It will be the beginning of a higher one.